Well, Tess, it's Mental Health Awareness Week in Scotland. From a PFA Scotland perspective, it's important to check in and see how everything's going. So, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you for asking. It's an exciting week for us as part of the Rangers women's team. We've got a very few exciting days ahead of us, with Sunday being the league deciding last fixture of the season at Ibrox against Hibs. So that's taking up currently most of my headspace, I guess, if you like. It's been nice on a personal level to have played last Wednesday and Sunday, so that adds to the excitement, I think. So yeah, I'm good, recovering from those two games, and going towards the end of the season, which is also a bit of a uncertain time when it comes to the summer, with contracts expiring and deciding where futures may lie. So it's not just a focus on football for me at the moment, but a bit of a broader view as well on where life will take me after this summer. So, but all in all, I'm fit and healthy, which is great. So I'm doing all right.
Good.
What about you?
Yeah, well, good. It's been our season's now came to an end. Obviously, we lost in the playoffs last week, which was disappointing. Kind of came to a bit of an abrupt end, more so than we'd hoped or planned for. But that's kind of the nature of the playoffs, I suppose, and the nature of football. But similarly to yourself, that takes you into that period of unknown and not really knowing what's going to come kind of past summer. So those are situations, or a situation that I found myself in before, and I know that can be challenging. So how are you feeling about that build up to that? How are you feeling about summer? I know you're focused obviously on the game at the weekend, but how do you kind of find yourself when it comes to moments like this, that uncertainty, or how do you cope with that?
Yeah, some days are a bit easier than others. So some days you find yourself maybe worrying a bit because you don't have all the answers yet for where the future, where it might take you. But it's, for me personally, it helps talking about those doubts and uncertainties with people close to me, my partner, my family, my close friends within the team, which is always nice to sort of bounce ideas off, or just to share your feelings and thoughts and emotions. So that is one way for me to cope with the challenges that a football career and life automatically will bring. So that is one way for me to make sense of it all a little bit more. There's also obviously the support that the PFA Scotland offers, the mental health support, which I'm not afraid to admit that I have used over my time here in Scotland. This is my fourth season, so at times, when it comes to performance on the pitch or life off the pitch issues, I've felt like talking through things with an independent outsider, with a professional, has also helped my mental health. So that's how I try to cope with these types of things. Yeah.
And has that been something that was always came quite natural to you in terms of being able to discuss that, or is that something that maybe takes a little bit of time for you to almost understand it within yourself before you've reached out at times for help in the past?
Yeah, I think initially I always try to solve all my issues myself, which is probably the way we've been raised in this football world. I'm not sure how it is in the men's game, but growing up in the women's game, initially or in my first years, it's since becoming a professional. I guess there was a little bit of an expectation to just, whilst there's dogs running around us, by the way, which is good for mental health as well, by the way, some dog time. I feel like in the last years it's been more openly discussed and more offered as well at clubs where I've played at, sports psychologists and just well-being officers. So that's great that it's been an option at the clubs that I've played for and at the national team as well. Just because as footballers we spend a lot of time trying to get our body physically right and tactically trying to improve our game, watching video analysis, but probably the biggest part of our game is mentally, how you cope with setbacks, how you're able to perform under pressure, all these types of things. So yeah, luckily I feel like in last years there's been a lot more openness about the whole topic. I don't know if you would agree in the men's game.
Yeah, no, for sure. I suppose that I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on, like, in terms of the female game as such. You know, like, my experience is obviously being in the men's teams throughout the years of my career, but there's very much that kind of macho bravado of it's weak to show any kind of fragility mentally or anything like that. You know, is that something that's common in a female environment or a female changing room, or still as prevalent, or maybe not as prevalent?
I feel like not as prevalent anymore, but 10, 15 years ago when I started playing more professionally, it definitely was the case. And I always had my parents and family and friends to be fragile and vulnerable with, if you like. But I didn't always feel like I could be as open in a team environment, because indeed, I feel like the conception would be the idea would be that that's a sign of weakness. Whereas I personally never seen it that way, but you also don't want others to perceive you that way. So at times I would just close that part of my inner world off a little bit with teammates and coaches, which probably didn't help me perform, if I'm being honest. So I feel like the more open I can be with my thoughts and feelings with coaches and with players, the more they understand how I work as a human being. So at times, for example, I can get really frustrated, like in training sessions as well, in small-sided games if we lose, and sometimes, or most of the times, that is actually a build-up from things that has happened. Maybe I've been on the bench and I haven't been spoken to by the staff, and it's actually quite a build-up. So, but people would only see like an outburst of frustrations, and they're like, well, what's going on there? So, I think the more you can open the floor, and I think the more we check in with each other as well. I think that is the main part. For me, it's really helpful if coaches and players ask me, hey, how are you? Especially when they see that I might not be my full, my happy self, then there's usually something going on or something that's bothering me. But the communication it needs to be opened first, that communication, before I feel I can share what's on my mind. So I feel like the more we check in with each other, really, it's quite basic and simple. It's not no rocket science, but the more we ask each other, like, how are you doing? The more I personally feel like I can be the best version of myself, if you like, on and off the pitch, and can perform to the best of my abilities.
Yeah. I think it's similarly, often it's that question, it's that kind of opening the door to really checking in someone and asking how they're doing. And I think we almost, throughout our squads and with our teammates, there's like a kind of baseline of how someone presents himself, and any deviation from that often is an insight into what's really going on. I think someone like yourself, who's almost so vibrant and full of personality and charismatic, then if we see you changing that, like, the natural thing almost seems like the obvious thing to see on the Tessel Middag, okay, let's check in. And I think so often that us consumed by our own world, that we bypass that, or we just look past it, and we can simplify it down and just say, oh, it's just because we lost multi games, or Tess's team didn't do well, or Michael's team did, whatever it may be. We almost kind of write it off as nothing, more to consider than what it is. But often it's opening that door of and saying, look, everything okay, you doing okay? And I think in my experience, it was maybe something that I would have done anyway in my career. I would have been aware of other people, or certainly emotionally aware of other people, but having went through my own experience struggling with kind of depression and mental health issues, that I kind of recognise my own coping mechanisms and how I try to act on a day-to-day basis. And probably the best way I could describe it is I became really, really good at wearing a mask. And I probably recognised what I thought other people expected of me as a person. And whether I was fit or whether I was injured, most of the time injured at my kind of lowest, it became important to me that other people didn't feel that from me. Other people didn't feel that negativity, if you like, of how I was feeling kind of deep down. So I would then try and carry out and act how other people expected me to act, which was actually even more detrimental to me, because that exacerbated what was already there, real up and down kind of like fluctuation in my moods throughout the day anyway. And I think we fear almost asking that question sometimes, and we're not really sure how to handle it. We don't have those tools to have those conversations with people. But it really just takes you to check in and say, like, how are you doing? And I think recognising that in other people now, having had my own issues, does allow me to see it a little bit more in other people. And I think that it's been really surprising, but really refreshing to be able to have those conversations with people, that when you do say, like, you okay, is everything okay? And whether it's football or something personal or something going on in your home life or whatever it may be, people do tend to talk, and it's almost that gaining that level of trust in somebody else, that somebody actually cares who I am as a person, recognises the human being and not the footballer. And I think that battle between, like, your identity is so often as footballers, we're seen first and foremost as footballers and not human beings. And until we make that shift of let's treat people like human beings, and what they do for their job is that comes secondary to that. How do we make the human being feel the best, like you said, the best version of themselves? And as a byproduct of that, we probably get the best out of them as athletes. So I think that conversation, like you said, being able to be a bit more open about it, talking about it more freely, and not feeling like there's any kind of barriers in the way as such, of being able to do that in what is an incredibly competitive environment. And even some of my closest friends that I've had in football, I've played the same position as me, and at times you're in a direct competition with them to play on a Saturday. And that in itself offers, like, separate challenges in terms of who you talk to, how it might land if you talk to them. Do you really feel like you can talk to a coach about it? Can you talk to your manager who's picking the team? You know, the stigma attached to that is, well, selfishly the coach needs to think about what's best for the team. Can he really play a player who isn't mentally in the right space just now? And I think all that does is act as a real deterrent to then anybody really speaking on it. And until we do start normalising the conversation and humanising the conversation, is that these are everyday struggles that everybody has in any walk of life, then it's going to be difficult for us to make any real meaningful progress on it.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's powerful that you are willing to share what you've been through. Knowing that, especially for young guys, as we know from research, it's hard to open up. So, well done for doing so. And I think you're right when you say that some people almost fear asking the question, "How are you?" because they don't know how to respond if they say, "Well, I'm actually not doing too well at the moment." But I think it's really important to know that if you're struggling a bit, you don't expect others to fix the problems for you. Sometimes it can just be really refreshing to share how you feel, and that can actually lift a massive weight off your shoulders already. And like you said, it's if someone recognizes the person maybe behind the footballer, Tessel or Michael, then you just feel seen, and that can already help massively. So I think that's definitely a question that we should try if we can, and try and ask people. And indeed, you probably need a level of trust for someone to answer you in all honesty. But that's then with the person you would ask if you're asking them how they're doing. So they don't need to open up. But even if it's just a bit of a conversation and without having all the answers at the ready, I think that could be a really powerful thing to do.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we forget sometimes that it's not always our job to have the answers when you're speaking to someone. Sometimes it's not about fixing the problem. And I think a common issue that we have as men across the board is that men assume the role of thinking they need to fix the problem. And so often I think women do that far better in terms of listening and giving space to actually hear what's been said. Whereas from a man's perspective, I think too often it's, right, how do we fix it, how do we remedy it? And so often part of the almost therapeutic process is actually just allowing someone the space to speak and understanding the power of listening. And that you don't have to offer a solution, you don't have to tell them what they need to do to make the change, to feel better or to improve a certain aspect of their life. Really, often these are thoughts that someone's battling and problems they're battling within their own head, and as soon as you verbalise that, especially if it is someone that you've got a relationship with, that you can then give that to and trust them to hold it to a degree. Something I'd heard a while ago was that vulnerability fosters connection, like deep connection, and I think that's a really powerful thing between two people. If you can trust someone to be vulnerable with them and know that they can hold that and receive it and just listen to it with zero judgment, and you can be totally transparent, and I think that goes such a long way to actually helping someone just share that burden that they're carrying. And a lot of the time in my experience, it was the thought of burdening other people with my issues which stopped me from doing it. And that built up and built up and built up, and I eventually reached out. I was at Aberdeen at the time. I had a really, really close relationship with the club doctor, a guy called Gary Ritchie. Eventually I kind of went to it, I broke down in front of him and kind of just said that I don't feel myself, and this has been going on for a year, like well over a year at that time. And Gary was incredible. He listened, he didn't say a word, he just sat, heard me out, and immediately said, let's get help, let's see what help we can do. And one of the things I went on to, which I was really hesitant to, was medication. I went on to antidepressants, which I stayed on for close to 3.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And only recently, actually, I've come off them, which is it's great. But it was eventually the kind of realisation that you could talk to someone about it and that someone would get it. And I think that we create all these barriers ourselves to actually being able to talk about it, because we worry about how it's going to land. Is someone going to worry about us? I think about, I've got an incredible, very, very fortunate, incredible family that are the most loving and supportive people I could possibly ask for. But even in my kind of biggest struggles, the idea of putting that on them was too much, and actually just made it worse then, if you know what I mean, because you become more, you feel more isolated, you feel more on your own, and it becomes even more of an act when you have to try and pretend that everything's okay because you don't want people worrying about it. But it's almost about accepting that it's actually entirely, depending on what's going on in your life, there's so many life circumstances that the most logical thing in the world, the most rational thing in the world is for it to impact you. And to be able to talk about that, it should be natural. But I think from a societal perspective, so often, you know, young men in particular, I'm sure for that's the same with women, are taught to be, you know, you just got to step up, you just got to do this, you get on with it, you suppress emotion, you suppress how you're feeling and carry on. And the internal damage that's doing to you is creating probably all sorts of trauma that at some point you have to confront. So like the more of an open environment, a kind of forgiving and vulnerable environment that we can create, ultimately builds connection within us. And I think that, like you said, to kind of circle back, when it comes to a team performing and individuals within that, we all want to be at our best. We all want to be at our best as humans, as people, and then drive from there. And I think that will always benefit performance. And certainly in my experience, the best I've played and the best I've felt is when, you know, my mental health's been good. And similar to what you said, like, we have processes in football of how to try and rehab if you get an injury. We have physiotherapists, we have sports scientists. We get sent for scans if we're lucky, if there's operations they need, you know, clubs will try and do that for us. Mm-hmm. But in order to actually be in a place physically to do that, we need to be there mentally. And that's the fundamental part of everything that we do, not only in football but in life, is how are we mentally to try and be ourselves. So can we look at trying to bring in something that apportions the same amount of importance and understanding to the mental side of football. And that's not just necessarily the injury, like, you know, the ups and downs of not playing, or it's been an up and down season for myself, for example.
Yeah.
And I've had a few seasons like that as well. That brings such challenges in itself.
Yeah, it does. And I can resonate with what you said earlier about, despite us both, by the sounds of it, being in a fortunate position to have very loving and supporting families. It's quite a step to try, to fill them in on exactly how you're feeling, because you, like in my case, I sometimes want more of an independent outsider to talk to and see what they have to say about it. So in your case, it was a club doctor. In my case, it has been a sports psychologist at times, which really helped me to rationalize certain processes, because sometimes you can't really see or understand how you're feeling, but then you talk through it and it'll makes much more sense, and you in the end don't end up being a better footballer, but a better, you know, daughter, sister, partner. So it helps you with other aspects of your life as well. So I think I know for a fact, having been at many management committee meetings for PFA Scotland over the last few years, that it's a massive priority for the union to try and offer that support service for the players, because not everyone might be in a position where the club is able to have a support person, whether it's a doctor or a psychologist or a well-being officer or someone else you trust within the organization, really. So it's really important that there is independent help out there. an independent helpline that you can call, a service that members can use. So yeah, I think that's really important, and I'm glad that it's such a priority for the union.
Yeah, sure. I think that confidentiality is so important that, like you said, it's that external service that we PFA Scotland are able to offer our members, that if you're not quite comfortable speaking to someone at the club for many of the reasons that we've touched on today, like, I can totally understand that, and I felt that myself, but it's been able to access that help that PFA Scotland offer to get any kind of support that you need, and that could be a mental health issue, it could be different forms of addiction, or, you know, for me, probably all one and the same. You know, it's all probably derives from some sort of mental health issue, but that support's there, and it's something I'm really, really proud of that we've got at PFA Scotland, that we're there almost 24/7 to try and help our members in any way, shape or form that we can. So
yeah, and especially for players like myself who aren't from Scotland, it's nice to have a chat face to face, in person, looking someone in the eyes, which I maybe would have done with my family or parents or friends back home, but being in Scotland, I'm not always able to do so. So that is something that I benefit from as well, to have a one-on-one conversation with someone, and like you said, build a bit of a connection, and get help mentally that way.